Good evening. I am Mayor Pro Tem Edward Wood, and I am calling this regular meeting of the University Place City Council for Monday, April 21st, 2025 to order. Will the City Clerk do the roll call, please?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Boykin is excused. Councilmember Worthington?
Present.
Councilmember McCluskey?
I'm here.
Councilmember Fleming?
Here.
Councilmember Grossi?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wood?
Present.
Mayor Figueroa is excused. Mayor Pro Tem, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Would Councilmember McCluskey lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
and justice for all.
Okay, could I have a motion to approve our agenda?
Motion. I move to approve the agenda as distributed.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Or I thought we were going to have an amendment on the agenda.
Oh, yes. I'd like to make an amendment. Sorry, excuse me. I thought Councilmember Worthington was going to do my job for me. I'd like to make it an amendment to remove item number 8, council rules for procedure amendments, so that we can have a council as a whole present during this study session.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
All right, second. Can I have help me with procedures? Can I just have a motion to approve as amended, or do I need to vote down the
Strictly
first one?
speaking, you would have to move to approve the amendment and then move the adoption of the agenda as approved if that prior motion had passed. So technically speaking, it would be two motions. However, if the sense of the chair is that the motion is uncontroversial and likely to be amended or likely to be granted, you could collapse it into one.
All right. Well, actually, we'll do two votes. Can I have a all in favor of the proposed amendment, which is to remove item number 8, Council Rules of Procedures Amendments, and postpone till a further date? Please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. All right. Can I have a motion to approve the amended agenda?
You already had a motion.
Okay.
You just need to call for a vote.
Okay. We'll call for a vote. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Or sorry. Can I?
Yeah, point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Please
It's
do.
a motion to approve the
Amended.
motion on the table.
Correct.
It's
Thank
not,
you.
you don't need a motion. You've got the motion.
Yeah.
You
Got
just
the
need to
motion.
vote.
All in favor of approving the agenda as amended, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. All right, we are now for public comment. Could you put the slide on the screen? And is there anyone online?
I don't see anyone online, Mayor Pro Tem.
All right. And I have nobody on a list for public comment. Is there anybody here who would like to come? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Now can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Are there any objections to approving the consent agenda? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. We're now on item number 7, City Manager and Council comments reports.
Mayor Pro Tem and Council, I have one report tonight, and I'm going to turn the mic over to City Attorney Matt Kaiser to introduce the topic of the opioid abatement. Council and opioid abatement does us under that general subject, and Matt's going to have some slides. This won't take too long, hopefully, but we'll have. I'll turn it over to Matt, and if there's any council questions, of course, of Matt on this after he goes through the slides. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and members of the council. Matt Kaiser, City Attorney. One of the things, and I have an assist waiting in the wings from Jennifer Hales, our Public Safety Administrator, so if I need to phone a friend. Jennifer will be up here for that, depending on where the council discussion goes. This is an outgrowth of a matter which council had discussed at its last meeting, I believe under the council comment section, had requested an update where are we at on the various opioid abatement type funds and the progress of various settlements and the like. So this is intended to be a fairly short just update for the benefit of council, just so the council has a sense of at least staff recommendations on the front end. The staff recommendations pretty much stay the course. You can kill, but obviously through the course of discussion, we're happy to field any other questions at the end of the presentation. So just to give the council just a quick recap, some of this we've covered off and on over the course of the last 2-3 years. The Washington Attorney General's Office, and you've seen this in the news, has entered into a number of opioid-related settlements with a number of entities. There's 6, and they're referred to on the screen by what is their general shorthand term. These are not all the various lawsuits that the Washington AG or their counterparts have going in other states, but these are generally the ones for which settlements have been reached. There's a couple others that are in the pipeline. The framework in Washington with then AG Ferguson had been with these funds that had been coming to the state. After the state took its share of attorney's fees off the top of any settlement, the balance would then be distributed on a roughly 50-50 basis, half to the state, half to local governments. In Washington, and for jurisdictions like University Place and other similarly situated jurisdictions, in order to qualify for the settlement, your primary requirement was that you have to have a population of over 10,000 or more. So jurisdictions that didn't meet that 10,000 threshold didn't get a share of the settlement. And there were 2 documents that I'm going to keep referring to throughout the course of this. Some of it they are distinct, but there's overlap between the 2. The first one that the council adopted is what's known as the One Washington Memorandum of Understanding, or the One Washington MOU, which we passed about 3 years ago. That's the general overall framework that all the participating jurisdictions signed off on. And that did 2 things, a couple things in fairly broad strokes. The first, it allocated who got what share of the funds. The second part is it provided a framework for how those funds could be used and the like. In terms of who got the funds, because we meet that population threshold of 10K or more, we ended up taking about 0.3 with a running number share of the local share of funds. We are the second lowest in the county, and looking at the One Washington MOU, only Edgewood is less than us in terms of that. By my count, you'll note the little question mark there because I was trying to count going through it. It looks like we had actually the 9th lowest distribution in the state. There is one county that's mixed into that 9, Garfield County, when we were going through the pro rata share. The numbers on that are numbers that they derived from other similar sorts of settlements in other states, and looking at what are the impacts of opioid-related impacts on local jurisdictions, police calls, law enforcement responses, those sort of things. The other agreement is the Pierce County Interlocal Agreement, which set up the Pierce County Opioid Abatement Council. We'll come back and talk about that because there are some meetings coming up associated with that. So I don't get accused of bearing the lead on this. The settlements that the City of University Place has received so far, these are through April 10th. I'm advised that there is one settlement that came in after that date. Those numbers are not reflected up here. We've received almost $53,000. That's money in the bank that's sitting in the city's bank account right now. We are set to receive through 2038 on the currently approved settlements, right around $166,000. That doesn't include any other settlements that might be out there. So far, the City of University Place has only spent about $306. Those are costs that, as part of the Opioid Abatement Council here in Pierce County, that's our pro rata share of their costs, their distributions, and the like. The one settlement that I was advised that we received last week was about $900 some odd from one of, I think it was the TIVA one. That's not reflected, but I don't think it materially impacts the big picture numbers that you're otherwise seeing up there. The allowable uses, which are derived from the One Washington MOU, I'm not going to go through and read all of these. The One Washington MOU has roughly an 11-page list of allowable uses, which they break out into these 3 top-level strategies with a number of other sub-level strategies. Long story made short is if you can think of an opioid-related use for funds, whether it ranges from one of these and connect it with a straight line from funds, it's probably an allowable use. And the One Washington MOU gives, like I said, 11 pages worth of further sub-bullet points of examples of those sort of funds in terms of how they may otherwise be used, how they may otherwise be allocated. I'll let this dwell here for just a second before I move to the next slide. Okay. I referenced earlier the Opioid Abatement Council. This is an entity which all the local jurisdictions in Washington that has received funds are required to set up. We are a participating member. We we signed off on the interlocal agreement together with all the other Pierce County jurisdictions receiving funds. The Opioid Abatement Council has 3 primary purposes. These are largely cut and paste from the various MOUs and the ILAs. It makes publicly available the reports and information associated with what local governments are doing. It also serves as a check, if you will, for are you using the funds consistent with opioid-related uses? So just to give you a quick example, on your consent agenda a few minutes ago, you passed an amendment authorizing some additional funds on the Chambers Creek Canyon Trail. That would not be an allowable use under that 11-page list that I had talked about. So we would report, say, we use these funds, and then they would serve as a potential arbiter if somebody had raised an issue. It's important to note that when it comes to the money, it starts off with, this is our money for those opioid-related uses. You're talking about, as we commonly term around here, the color of money. We do maintain full discretion over that, and that comes straight from the One Washington MOU. And the Pierce County Interlocal also anticipates that we get to decide what is best. So if, as a hypothetical, this council says we'd like to use number A, and the city of Tacoma or another participating member says, we don't really like A, we really wish you do B, this council can say, we really like A, and it's our money, and we can do that. Obviously, there'd be some hope or thought that local jurisdictions would collaborate, talk to each other, but at the end of the day, it is anticipated that each local body has discretion over how they use their funds. Under the One Washington MOU together with the ILA, there are 6 things that each local jurisdiction is required to do in order to spend that money. This is taken straight from, I think it's the One Washington MOU. The first 3 are the ones I'd urge council to focus its attention on. The last 3, in terms of approving and denying proposals, that's pretty par for the course for us receiving funds, which, as we talked about, we've already received those funds and reported how we use the funds. The first 3 are ones where there's still some ongoing discussion in terms of what the methodology is there opportunities, and review and receiving proposals. One of the things, I know this font is really, really small, so I apologize in advance. And so hopefully I can still see it too. One of the things I did, when I was taking a look at this on Friday afternoon, in terms of, where are we at relative to our other jurisdictions? I pulled the most recent dashboard that's available through the Opioid Abatement Council, the Pierce County Opioid Abatement Council. This time last year, they had a meeting, I think it was on May 2nd of last year. And then this is taken straight from their PowerPoint, so that's why it's a little squished. So I'm trying to pull their PowerPoint, plug it into this PowerPoint. My PowerPoint foo isn't the strongest. But looking at those first 3 aspects, making sure, where are we compared to our peer jurisdictions that are members of the Opioid Abatement Council in terms of how are they gathering input, methodologies, those sort of things. At the time, about half the jurisdictions had indicated that they had community-based input processes in effect. We are in the box that says no. But the ones that do have community-based input processes, they range the gamut. Edgewood represented that they get input at city council meetings by going to the Opioid Abatement Council. Lakewood on the other end of the spectrum, I'd at least put them on the other end of the spectrum. They have a Community Services Advisory Board. That is their equivalent of our legislative commissions, which they use to solicit and seek public recommendations and such input. The other jurisdictions that have indicated have various other degrees of process. On the methodology for obtaining proposals, again, really small, sorry, my PowerPoint foo is not the strongest. On this, again, about half have some process, half don't. Edgewood on one hand says, well, at least what they reported out, we go to the meetings. Lakewood on the other end of the spectrum, we have our advisory commission. Auburn had some methods. Gig Harbor asked essentially internally, do we have some internal uses? on there. And Tacoma had represented, they had a request for proposals, but they didn't receive any input or any solicits for that. Whether that's currently the case in the 23-24 cycle, we'll probably know here in the not too distant future. And then reviewing and receiving proposals, only one jurisdiction actually reported in the last full cycle that they received a proposal, which was Auburn. For our part in the City of University Place, we did do some input or some solicit process. These are screen grabs. The one on the left is from the City of UP website. This is actually the police page. If you were to go to cityofup.com and go to police and then scroll all the way down at the bottom, it's really small, I know.
Can you read that?
No, no.
No,
No, I can't read it.
I know. I told you my power. Yeah.
Maybe a paper handout next time.
I put the
Then put on my
I put the
reading
final
glasses.
touches on this Friday afternoon. The packet had already gone out, so that's on me, not on anybody else. Where we had identified the monies. The one on the right, it's actually the same text if you can actually read it. That appeared in the headline newsletter. I want to say it's the April 17th last year edition on the headline newsletter. Both of those had directed comments toward UP Public Safety at cityofup.com. I'm informed that no input had come in. Hell's is shaking her head, suggesting I'm right. So on that. So obviously those, at least the page on the left is still a live page, at least when I put together the PowerPoint last week. So with that wraps up my comments. Steve said I had 10 minutes, or give or take. I think I clocked in at about the 10-minute mark. We're happy to field any questions that council may otherwise have.
So what we'll do, because this is our period on city manager and council comments reports, we'll do questions on this first, and then we'll go to council comments after that. So what questions do I have for, Councilman Worthington?
Thank you. Just as a reminder, I serve on the Opioid Abatement Council, and I have since last year. It was just about a year ago. And by the way, we have an upcoming meeting May 1st, and the intent of this was to do our annual report about what progress we've made since the last time we met, which would have been September. Following the May meeting last year, May 2nd, I reported to the council about that meeting, and in that meeting, or in my report, I mentioned that the Opioid Abatement Council staff had estimated that our revenue, UP's revenue for all anticipated settlements, so this is not a certainty, but was about, my notes from that meeting are $521,883 over the next 17 years, or roughly $30,000 a year. To give you some sense of what we have, and while we have 161 or so thousand today, the number has some potential to grow. I just as a refresher, also mentioned about the various jurisdictions in my report then, and the report that I gave this council in September, when we had a subsequent meeting of the Opioid Abatement Council, some of the choices that jurisdictions have been making in their processes. And there are two paths many of the jurisdictions are on. One, approximately half the jurisdictions are pooling resources, and it may not be all of them in one pool, it's several pools, but pooling resources and contracting together. We made a decision not to pool. I believe if you can make a negative decision, I mean, basically we asked ourselves that question and we chose not to go down that path. So we're on our own, and roughly the other half of the jurisdictions are similarly on their own. And they have been doing some things. As Mr. Kaiser mentioned, we have the City of Auburn, for example, has been expending funds, and Auburn receives money from King County and from Pierce County. They're split, as you know, by a county line. In their case, they have been using those funds, at least to some level, for housing assistance for transitional housing. They basically contract with substance abuse related transitional housing. Oxford House would be the typical example of the type of places where there's a sober living requirement, both in terms of sober from alcohol and sober from any drugs. And that's how they have been using some of their funds. So At this point, I guess I wanted to just add also, while the city may not have heard any feedback on this, I have received feedback as a council member on the subject of opioid abatement funds and how they may be used to address some of the needs in our community. And certainly I have seen and know of several UP families that are suffering through their loved ones working through an opioid addiction. And we're looking for ways, very appropriate ways, to use these funds, in my mind, to help people in UP that have that chronic, difficult issue to be able to overcome. So, at this point, for my question, since that's the context of my statement, does staff have any recommendations on possible uses?
We do have some that have been at least evaluated in-house, and this is the part where I'm going to have the phone a friend. I'm going to invoke my phone a friend card on this one, because we have looked at them, particularly in the law enforcement arena. There's a couple proposals that have at least circulated on an informal basis in staff when we've discussed it. And with that, I'm going to have my phone a friend.
Yes,
Jennifer Hale, Public Safety Administrator.
Yes, thank you. One of the challenges we have is that we do not have a human services department within the City of University Place, as you know. When we had the ARPA and CARES funding come in through COVID, we used the Families Unlimited as a surrogate human services to kind of help us identify people who needed rental assistance. This funding, together with this unified regional approach to homelessness and some of these other things that are starting to kind of come up, presenting a little bit of a challenge because we don't have the subject matter expertise in-house to be able to field some of those things that many of the cities that you listed do. So some of the ideas that we've come up with in the future, and that's why we've sort of held off on the methodology, because we don't want to get ahead of the council and some of the opportunities that you all are being presented with in the various places where you're serving, where this funding you may find to be appropriate. Current and future law enforcement expenditures related to the opioid epidemic. There are tools law enforcement can use in the field to identify fentanyl and other opioid substances that they could use. Additionally, think about your parks maintenance people who frequently come in contact with people who are in that condition. They need training on how to deal with that. Educating and training for Public Works, Parks Maintenance, and law enforcement regarding appropriate practices and precautions when dealing with fentanyl and other drugs. Promising programs or strategies identified by the city's community outreach officer and first responders in the field. Future costs, needs, services identified by the recently assembled unified regional approach to homelessness in Pierce County, of which Councilmember Grassi is the city's representative. Potential funds to support the newly formed community court in UP for defendants and participants. And then again, pooling and partnering with a neighboring jurisdiction with a human services department to deploy funds. So those are just some of the things we've been talking about.
Okay, so we're going to have right now Councilmember McCluskey, then Councilmember Fleming, then Councilmember Grassi.
All right, thank you. So, it's not much per year, but cumulatively, it amounts to something over, a long stretch of time. I know ancillary, we will have opportunities to use these limited funds in those different avenues. So my thought was to keep it in a fund that is more fluid and flexible. If the community resource officer needs it, our parks or maintenance, or if they need training, because as we go along, we don't know. We can't see into that crystal ball yet on how that, we already know how it's going to impact us. We've seen it, we've lived it. Certainly our police officers and people in parks have definitely run across it. But to spend it wisely where it makes the most sense, then we can get the most traction on the most leverage. You mentioned the UGA, and they're going to have a University Place ante up with something. That seems like the direction, if it so occurs, kind of like shape. It's shaping up in that way because, it costs money for that. And so to reserve that as well, and also maybe there's other ways that we can augment this funding and other funding sources as well. So even though it's so small,
Yeah.
but aggregately, it could be potentially something that we can make bigger and better if we wisely choose to do that. And I don't know what that opportunity is or the opportunities are. And so that's kind of my take on it. And so if we're able to use these funds to, for example, like if we're going after a grant, and this could be part, the city's, portion of that grant if it relates to opioids. I know it has to have a direct tie-in to that. So that's my thinking right now.
Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thanks for that presentation. And I thought I heard you say, but I want to hear it a little bit more crystal clear. When I looked at this proposal and what we can or can't use the funds for, I interpreted it just maybe a little bit different. And like Councilmember McCluskey has stated, it's a small amount, so by itself doesn't really do a lot. But if you team it up with other funding sources, there's a lot that we can do. And I interpret it as the definition of what you can use that money for was left kind of loose, so that you can either direct or indirect tie opioid to just about anything we do.
I would tend generally to agree with that, and I would base it on what I call the straight face test, which is if I can make a straight face and say it's an opioid-related use, I think we're there, subject to, somebody on the Opioid Abatement Council saying, no, you can't, in one of their subsequent meetings. So as Councilmember McCluskey noted a few minutes ago, if there's a grant opportunity where we pledge some of these funds, in anticipation of another fund, depending on what that grant program is, I think that meets that straight line and straight face test that we'd otherwise be looking at. But obviously, the specific program, specific match, that's always where the devil's in the details.
Sure. And, so as we go through the process of figuring out what's the best use of these funds, I hope we would use not a myopic view of it, but take a little broader view so that we can really take into consideration other programs and projects that would benefit from use of these funds. And not miss out on those opportunities as they come up, because we're so afraid of stepping outside someone's color lines there in terms of how that money can be expended. So, so my question you answered in that is we're not really super limited, but we've got to meet the straight face test, as you say it. But we can look at this from the perspective of we can tie this to almost any project we have. Depends on how we want to do it when we go forward with it. So that was a question and a comment at the same time. So
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Grassi.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I thank you for the presentation, and I concur. A lot of my thoughts were similar to Councilmember McCluskey's. And just clarification, deadline for our decision is not there.
No.
Okay.
No.
There's no time.
It's open.
on
Okay.
the money.
Okay. And so we specifically are not tying ourselves to a deadline. Okay. Just wanted to super clarify. Thank you.
Yeah, and to be clear, I haven't seen a deadline. So, we continue to receive the funds through 2038, at least on the current cycle. So,
Okay.
And I did notice that on the Washington State Healthcare Authority, the state's platform now has a frequently asked questions. It appears that, they're also looking at ways they can work with cities and counties for this funding to deploy their funds and also our funds, not that we'll give them their funds, but that we can work together in a more unified way. So this is a new item that I had seen on their website. So I think everybody's kind of in the same place we are in terms of thinking about when and how to use these funds, but it's not critical to decide that right now.
Can I have one follow-up question? I'm sorry. Any discussion or anyone hearing anything about school districts being involved in this funding as of yet?
The only school district use, which you saw last year, we hosted together with UP Schools a meeting where we brought the DEA in on fentanyl abuse. And there's a mother here locally who lost her son, and a recent bill that has passed, I believe it was last legislative session, in his honor, mandates this in the schools. Yes. And so the DEA is actively pursuing that, the health department with all kind of materials, and we are always looking for those opportunities, as you know, to do outreach, and this would squarely fit within that outreach.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'll take a turn, and then Councilmember Worthington after me again. So one remaining question that hasn't been asked yet. One of the possibilities you'd mentioned was training, and there's another one mentioned, the UGA, or the Unified Homeless, whatever that thing's called. Do you feel like there is a pressing need just from a safety perspective to conduct some level of training with our public works, parks, or law enforcement staff sooner rather than later? Because right now we're kind of sitting on this like, we got time to decide, and you're right, we do. But is there a pressing need to get this training done that we should be considering this sooner rather than later?
I think your law enforcement professionals are a little bit more versed in the training, de-escalation, and we have the use of the co-responders, and, they're pretty well trained. But our parks maintenance people and our public works people could certainly benefit from that. Typically, those kinds of trainings are stuff that we know about and would host. And so I will never say that we can't do more training, because I think training, when Matt was begging for people to take this on, that's the one angle that I saw that could be beneficial. In addition to some of the tools of identifying fentanyl in the field now are becoming pretty cool, where patrol can, have devices that they're able to see where the fentanyl is. And as you know, lots of things are laced with fentanyl now. So I don't think that, it's an emergency, but I think that if we were to identify some training, it would definitely be useful.
And then in conjunction with that training, like some form of, because training covers just about everything. It could be just recognizing this could be possibly fentanyl contamination versus this person is laying out here and dying of an opiate overdose. Are there tools that would support action to go with the training, such as Narcan or safe procedures, things like that?
This money, we can purchase Narcan. We do have Narcan at the PD, and all the patrol cars do have Narcan. I'm not sure if Jack, no Narcan. So that could be an avenue. And Jack and I could sit down with Jack and Chief Burke, and we could go through some ways that we could help their park staff, and maybe just visit with them and see how comfortable they are and find some training that would be useful.
Okay. I'd be interested in hearing if there's something useful, speaking just for myself right now. No.
Sure.
But if there's something useful we could do that would need to be done sooner rather than later. But I'm not interested in just spending money to spend the money.
Understand.
So, okay.
We'll report back.
All right. Councilmember Worthington.
Thank you. And thank you on all the various comments from the colleagues as well. Indeed, the list that the city attorney provided of possible uses is broad, and there's a whole lot that falls in there. And admittedly, it might exclude trails, but
not for lack of creativity.
Yes, but we could probably figure out a way to even get some trail money in there. But really, what's the most important thing we need to do? What's the thing that brings the best value, and what is this money really for? Narcan would be an example. But did you know how much Narcan costs?
No.
You can get it on Amazon, $30 for 2 cans. Is that going to change our budget? We should have it.
Yes.
Our cars should have it. But that really doesn't buy much for us. So, what we need to find out is where's the gap, in my view. We need to find out where the gap is in our community. Mm-hmm. Where is the need here? And in a lot of ways, it's about the lives that have been touched by fentanyl. And it's about the recovery process in many of those cases. And in the recovery process, there's a fair amount of help available for treatment therapy, but there's a gap in my experience. There's a gap in treatment housing when you work for transitional housing, financially speaking. And there needs to be more of that in place. I think if we were to spend a little bit of time and do a robust public outreach in our community to find out where the need is, that might be one of the areas. And it could be not as involved as putting together a human services division here, but perhaps we go back to fund. And we ask them to manage a grant program that is as simple as someone coming out of treatment with a UP driver's license and wants a $1,000 voucher for 3 months of housing in transitional housing, we grant it. We have a fund to pay it. It could be as simple as that. And that in itself might be enough to change their lives at a time when it's very critical. So I think if we look for those gaps and think about the therapeutic effects, we're going to get more effective power in changing people's lives. And I think also it'll apply to the reason we have these funds, and not in some other way. That is a need, but not the same level of hierarchy of need as we would find if we were to do a robust outreach on this subject. I bring those as just a simple example of how we might be able to put that to effective use and make a difference for people in UP. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Grassi.
Thank you. Thank you, Member Trump. Thank you, Councilmember Worthington, for your passionate thoughts. I just want to offer another piece of this discussion as far as Narcan and prevention, because I do believe prevention is so important and treating. But if for those watching and for our team, Narcan readily available, complimentary at the health department, as many as you. So I do encourage, like you said, everyone should have it in their car and their bag, but you can get as many as you need at our health department, readily available. So thank you.
Councilmember McCluskey.
Okay, thank you. I concur with Councilmember Grassi, and thank you, Councilmember Worthington, for that thought as well. Fentanyl and opioids, they're family destroyers, bottom line. And unfortunately, more and more people are being impacted by that. It's not getting any less. So I think it's really urgently necessary that we have our Parks and Public Works staff be trained on how to identify and use Narcan at point of contact, right? Because sometimes, calling 911, it's too late. And typically, if they're homeless, they're going to be hanging out in our parks, and I think that when we stumble upon them, not only training them on how to use a Narcan, how to identify when's the appropriate use, because you don't want to misuse it. There should be an avenue where that individual that is in a crisis moment, we know what to do. We can get that person engaged and hopefully, at least save his life at the moment, and then I'm not sure if there's a mechanism there yet, but I'm hoping that there will be a pathway forward where we can follow that individual through treatment and see how our funding and money that goes towards his recovery and his new pathway forward, and hopefully a new chapter in his life evolves.
Councilmember Fleming, did you have any more comments?
No, I think all the comments that have been made are very, very pertinent, and I don't have anything more to add. I think we've nailed this one pretty good, so thank you.
Thank you. I will just say I look forward to seeing some proposals. We have nothing on the agenda or timeline just yet, but if you could, I think you can see there's definitely some interest here, and at least a plan. If we can do that much, at least going forward, that would be great.
And I would add, if I may, for just a moment, I'll report back to the Opioid Abatement Council on their May 1st meeting about our discussion as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Mayor Pro Tem, can I add that Narcan in our public works and parks, I think that could happen like right now, sooner than later. That's my position on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll need to be trained to go with it, but yes.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And now we'll go to...
With that, I'll yield back the city manager report to the city manager if there's anything additional.
All right.
That's our report for today. So on to council comments.
Okay, then. Council comments, and I think I'll start with Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and good evening to everyone. Sorry I couldn't be with you in person tonight, but hopefully by the next go-round I can. Just hope everyone had a very blessed and restful weekend with Easter. I know it was one of those holidays that brings joy to everyone, I think, or just about everyone that we know of. Two things just to comment on. There was a SHAPE housing meeting that's coming up this Friday. And then PCRC that met last week, and interestingly enough, we set the world's records for the world's shortest meeting. I've never been to a PCRC meeting in which there was nothing on the agenda to discuss by anyone. So we met, we had convened, and then we adjourned, and that was it. So that is all I have tonight to share back with you. So in essence, there is nothing yet.
Thank you. We'll just go right to left. Councilmember Grassi.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you, Councilmember Fleming, for comments on Easter. Yes, I hope everyone had a great holiday. On Friday, had the honor of cutting the ribbon at the new Essential Pantry store right here in Market Square, and I just want to congratulate owners Cindy and David on a wonderful project. They have made that store beautiful, and it is ready to go. They commented to me on what a great time they had working with our city and how easy and streamlined Kevin and his team made it work. So thank you so much to our economic development team and Becky Metcalf for putting on a great ribbon cutting. They are open 7 days a week and ready to serve. So I encourage our community to go and see them. Also on Friday, also, along with Councilmember McCluskey, attended the regional unified regional approach to homelessness meeting. And that was a lot of good discussion, creating some ground rules and that we could all agree on, and creating open and transparent meetings for the future. So I think just getting started, but more to learn and more to come on that. And to see what comes out of that group, I'll be interested. And then had a wonderful time at Community Connection Place, also on Friday, for their senior bingo time and helping them out as well. So it was a wonderful time spent with our senior community. And that will conclude my comments, I believe. So thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Worthington.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Let's appreciate that. Just briefly, on Wednesday this last week, I had the opportunity to do something special, and I asked the city manager to reschedule my meeting with him when he was kind enough to do that, along with his staff. I was invited by Representative Levitt for the 28th to attend the bill signing for House Bill 1133. Which had passed both the House and the Senate and was signed by the governor on Wednesday. And the governor was kind enough to give me this little souvenir pin. So I now have a Governor Ferguson signature pin, not the actual one used, but nonetheless a memento from the event. And if you're wondering, you look at it, I think it's a flare. Anyhow, but it was great to be part of it. I appreciated the Representative Levitt's work to make this happen, and the Attorney General's office as well. In that presentation, or during the signing, there were about 20 or so people, and they included the Attorney General's office, who was not a sponsor, but a player in this event, along with a Republican House member and a member of the Democratic side of the Senate. There were, in the Senate testimony I mentioned, I testified at our last meeting, and there were no negative comments. So no opposition at the end of the day. It did, as HB 1133, as the council knows, it helps communities work through the process of placement of a level 3 sexually violent offender as they, in certain circumstances, may be placed in the community. And it helps the community have a better understanding of that process, and it also provides more information in the AG's, Attorney General's office, and perhaps for the judicial review that takes place as well. So somewhat technical, but it addresses an issue we had in our community a few years ago, and I think it's a good step in the right direction. I was very pleased to be part of that signing, and just a fun event. So I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember McCluskey?
All right, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I concur with Councilmember Fleming. I blinked and the PCR meeting was over. So I can't believe we didn't have anything substantial to discuss at that level, but I'm sure our meetings will be extra packed because of this lightness of this meeting. I attended as just an attendee to the UGA, Unified Regional. Yeah, I think they need to have another name for the homelessness one. I can't really relate to that, but I thought it was a really good meeting. I think the Uncommon Bridges is a really good consultant team that has a lot of information, a lot of experience in this field. So I'm looking forward to some really amazing results that will lead to some actionable items that we can make a difference in homelessness on a regional level, where it needs to be. I attended Parks Appreciation last Saturday, and the staff did an amazing job of organizing that, and several of the park commissioners were in attendance, as was our Mayor Pro Tem. There was a planting of a tree, and everybody enjoyed getting in the dirt and spreading the bark and pulling ivy out of trees along the way. And Friends of Colgate had a Easter egg hunt going at the same time, so that was quite interesting. That not only lay the bark, but have kiddos along looking for Easter eggs along the way. So a fun event, and the UP Refuge was there. They did a wonderful barbecue. Peace Out was there, and they augmented it with desserts and morning coffee and donuts. And congratulations to Peace Out. They're 15 years old and going strong with their community philanthropy in not only our city, but in the county as well. Also, Community Connection Place, May 7th is a Mother's Day luncheon, and they always do just a really sweet, special event for the mothers that are of the senior age. And that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. The only thing I have to report is, again, I was at Parks Appreciation Day, at least the first part of it. And I just wanted to offer my thanks to the Parks team, UP Refuse, Peace Out, and all the volunteers who were there to make this event really cool and got a lot of work done out at Colgate Park. And then for just staff purposes, I had a nice discussion with Roger from UP Refuse, and he expressed an interest at some point in coming to a council meeting and maybe having 15 minutes to do a presentation on current state of UP Refuse and things like that. And so if we could bring that up at our next agenda meeting, if we can see a place where we could, if we all want to put him on there and see what's going on. So, and then Councilmember Worthington.
Thank you. I'm sorry, a second chance, if you would. So,
Sure.
Did have another item. I did have the president of the HOA for Nantucket West talked with me about her concerns over the birthday event, and which is located, of course, in Cirque Park, which is right next to Nantucket West. So some concerns there. Certainly noise, people, traffic, things that go with large events. So I'm sure we will manage that to the best of our ability, and we'll do a good job of that. She also mentioned some more specific concerns about security, and I'd be happy to share those details just so people are aware of that.
Okay. This concludes our city manager and council comments and reports, and also concludes our regular portion of this meeting. We're now moved to study session, and we are going to go to item number 9, HB 1 House Bill 1110, Middle Housing Legislative Compliance Update, second study, and we have our staff, Kevin Brisky and Ken George. Thank you, gentlemen. And Kevin, if you could take a moment to introduce everybody who's there with you.
Good evening, Mayor good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council members. Sorry about that. Kevin Brisky with the City's Community and Economic Development Department. I'm here this evening with Kenneth George, Planning Manager with the city, and also Bob Bangford and Marcus Johnson, who's with Makers Architecture, who's the contracted consultant with the city to help get us in compliance with the House Bill 1110. So middle housing, one question that I have is, how many of you at some point in your lives have lived in some sort of housing other than a single family residence or a large apartment building? I know I have. When I first started working in the city many years ago now, I lived in a duplex here in the city for a few years before moving out of that. So I'm sure many of us have had experiences with some middle housing. Tonight, we'd like to go over the state requirements for House Bill 1110, Planning Commission's recommendation, and what happens next. And with this presentation, we'll have about 20 slides here. We'll stop periodically through those to take questions and then again take questions at the end. And we're going to kind of tag team the presentation as we'll have several of us going over the slides. First, the requirements of House Bill 1110. This is relating to middle housing. And middle housing is basically just a definition for types of housing that fall between a single family home and a larger, more dense type of building. House Bill 1110 was passed by the state legislature in 2023, and it essentially has the jurisdictions needing to come into compliance with House Bill 1110 6 months after their periodic comprehensive plan update, which essentially is end of June of this year for City of University Place. And it requires the city to allow 6 of the 9 middle housing types defined in the state law, has to allow 2 units on all residential lots, up to 4 units on residential lots if one of the units is designated affordable. It does allow jurisdictions to apply design standards to middle housing types. And we must apply the same development regulations as detached single-family homes. These development regulations would include things like setbacks, heights, floor area ratios, critical area ordinances relating to shorelines, wetlands, steep slopes, and also any codes, covenants, and restrictions that might be privately recorded with a subdivision would still apply to those. However, those are private agreements not regulated by the city. And lastly, there is a unit lot subdivision provision that needs to be added into our legislation to allow a unit lot subdivision. And we'll have slides here to go over many of these items here to come. The zones that these apply to in the city are the R1 and R2, or residential 1 and residential 2 zoning designations. Many people are familiar with these. The R1 zone is the largest zone in the city. It encompasses most of all of our residential areas. We do have some R2 zoning, primarily located off of Orchard on the east part of the city. With that, I will turn it over to Kenneth George to go over the Planning Commission's recommendations.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. Quite a few of the next slides in this presentation is going to be mainly the bulk of our presentation. So at this point, we'll be jumping around from the various presenters this evening, but I will be able to kick it off with the first section. But before I Oh, I already went to the next slide, but I wanted to at least touch on, before we get into the next slides, what the Planning Commission has been doing over the last year. We brought this before the City Council with a little bit of an update back in January, and some of you might remember that, and some of these slides will be a little bit familiar. The Planning Commission met over the course of, we had 4 study meetings at their regular meetings over between last year and this year, and just recently held a public hearing in last month to officially vote and recommend the code amendments that are in your packet this evening. And on those code amendments, there should have a large packet of those amendments which we've prepared, and those are written in such a way that they're the applicable sections that are being amended, with strike-through being sections being deleted, and underlined sections that are being added in. There are a few sections, 2 specific chapters that are brand new, and those ones aren't highlighted or underlined. They're just in black, and those are just brand new chapters, but at the top of that section will say in red that this is a brand new chapter being added in. In addition to the Planning Commission meetings, to further public engagement, we conducted a flash vote survey last October, and had about 441 responses to that survey. And we also hosted an informational table during the city's Christmas tree lighting event last December to make more members of the public aware and to take questions and answer questions and answers. We also had some scenarios of what middle housing could look like on typical lot sizes in University Place, help with preparation help by makers for that. And now I would like to get into the meat of just this next section. The planning, as Director Prisky mentioned, the state legislature requires or lists 9 middle housing types, and we're only required to adopt 6 of those. The Planning Commission is recommending that the following 6 up here on your slide are the ones that we would recommend adopting: duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, townhomes, stacked flats, and courtyard housing. The remaining 3 of those 9 are the higher density, or some of the higher density ones, so 5plexes and 6plexes. And again, the maximum number of units with affordability option, it would be 4. So University Place is not required to adopt or add in up to 5plexes and 6plexes if we don't choose to. And then we can go to the next one. We're not, this evening, you have the packet of code amendments, so we're not going to go through those line by line. I know you're thinking, thank you. But we do want to highlight some of the newer definitions. So one of the main things, we'll have to have we're adding in a definition for middle housing. This means, I'll read it for you as well. Means residential buildings that are compatible in scale, form, and character with single-family houses, and that contain 2 to 4 dwelling units. Middle housing includes duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, townhomes, courtyard housing, and stacked flats. So you can see in the definition we are proposing to include all 6 of those middle housing types in the definition itself. And we also are going to add separate, in the amendments, there are separate definitions for each of those 6 items. Next, and after this, I give you a little bit of a break. I think after this slide, we could pause for some questions, so just heads up on that. As Director Briscoe said, the density portion, 2 units up to 4 with affordability, is the main piece of middle housing, and also including allowing 6 of the 9 middle housing types. An option that the House Bill 1110 offers jurisdictions to adopt, should they choose to, is to apply design standards specific to those middle housing. And the legislature is clear that these are standards that we can apply to middle housing that we do not have to apply to detached single-family homes. A little bit of a difference there, but these are intended, we are proposing to adopt a design standard new chapter in the zoning code. And these are to get at allowing for some compatibility with detached single-family neighborhoods. There's a list of items here that we just want to highlight in the slide, as well as a few graphics that Makers has helped us develop, proposed to be inserted into the code as well. These include entry designs. So those entries, we'd like to regulate those entries facing the street. There's a minimum percentage of windows and doors to, again, regulate the front facade of middle housing that's facing the street. Driveway and garage standards to minimize the visual dominance of vehicle access, and front-facing garage doors that can have on the front, a street-facing front. Adding in facade articulation requirements to reduce the scale of middle housing and add architectural variety and visual interest. And also adding pedestrian access requirements that provide these pedestrian connections throughout middle housing development. And also want to point out, I don't have it listed here, and I also don't have a slide for it, that there are some development regulations pertaining to setbacks that the Planning Commission is proposing. Right now, our current setbacks, which would be applied for both detached single-family homes and middle housing, are 25 feet for the front, from the front side, 8 feet for the sides, and 30 feet for the rear. And so recommended for council consideration is to reduce the front setback from that 25 feet down to 20 feet. And that would be applied to both detached single-family homes and middle housing. But the caveat there is that it would only apply to the living space of a residence. It would not apply to the garage. Any garage or carport associated with single family or middle housing would still be required to meet a 25-foot setback. But to help development from both sides, single family and middle housing, the front entry of the house, the front of the house, and the entry can be projected forward from that and meet a 5-foot setback. And currently, we still have in our code additional provisions that allow front porch entryways to continue to project even further, and that's always been in the code and not being proposed to be eliminated. So those kinds of options, design-wise, allow for less of a garage-facing dominance for middle housing and even single-family housing, and especially with some of these duplexes where there's a lot of garages front-loading the street. So that wasn't here on the slide, but I definitely wanted to highlight that was one of the elements that the Planning Commission spent some time considering and ultimately recommending to reduce that. I think this would be a good time to pause for any questions from any of us.
Okay, first on my list was Councilmember Grassi.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Curious why the Planning Commission is recommending not to include cottage-style housing.
Yes, that's a simple question. We did kind of initially were including it, but we do have proposed in future work plans to incorporate a separate cottage housing. So we decided to tackle that all on its own. It is even in some of the model ordinances from Commerce, cottage housing is sort of a separate element of itself. So in the city's housing action toolkit, there was already a recommendation to reopen, or I say reopen because Director Brisky knows more, that we used to have a pilot program for cottage housing, and that lapsed, but we still have the ordinance for that and the information in that. So in our housing action toolkit back in 2021, I believe, it was recommended that we reopen that, take a look at it, and look at adopting something more permanent. So we haven't gotten there yet, but that's the reason why we decided to remove it from this list at this time.
Okay. Were you going to say something? Was Kevin going to say something? No. Also, I'm just one more question about design standards as far as to green space. and landscaping between units. Was there any consideration for that as well in the design standards?
There is consideration for one of the 6 courtyard housing does have that incorporated into it to ensure that those create a courtyard environment, but it goes back to having to regulate middle housing the same as detached single-family housing, and so like tree requirements or tree retention requirements and things like that were kind of lumped into the same category. I believe that we weren't able to regulate it. I don't know if anyone wants to.
I'll defer to Bob, but I believe if we put landscaping regulations on middle housing the way the state laws, we'd also have to apply it to single-family housing. It gave us the flexibility to apply architectural standards and access standards, but less of an ability to apply landscape standards unless we tried to apply it across the board to everything.
I see. Okay.
I think some other factors at play were the setbacks are fairly large, already allow for a decent amount of open space, and with the densities generally being in the 2 to 4 range. I believe lot coverage may have been one too, but with those, I think it was, in a lot of our work that we've done elsewhere, when you start getting 4 to 6 in those higher areas and really small lots, that's when you really need to have a separate standard for minimum usable open space. But I think given the setbacks and the lot sizes and the density numbers here, I think we're looking pretty good with where we were at.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councilman McCluskey.
Okay, thank you. Along with Councilmember Gross, I am concerned with the setbacks when you densify the R1 zoning, especially with an existing home for recreational use. And if children are to be in the ADUs, how does that impact their lifestyle in that environment as well? Because we are densifying that. And because you're going, the side yards, I'm not all that worried about going down to 5 feet. No one really, we use it as corridors, it's not really going to be used for any active uses or passive uses. So I'm mainly concerned with maybe the privacy on the front end of the homes versus the back end of the homes, how our people are going to function and use those open spaces, and also with the garages. We're still a car-centric society, and is it going to be a shared driving? For example, if an R1 home is already there, and there is a driveway there, and there's going to be, let's say, 2 or 3 other additional ADUs coming around it in the front and the back, is there a possibility of the shared driveway so that we don't create a plot that's full of driveways for each unit, and looking at the function of the sidewalk, so there's less cement going in and around that. So I'm trying to visualize actually how that's going to work and how people are actually going to live in that plot there to create a quality lifestyle. We don't want to densify and then impact the quality of lifestyle of the people that need to move into a home that's not at market rate pricing.
Sure. Yes. Very, very thoughtful question, Council Member. It's something that the Planning Commission took a hard look at with these design standards, and we do have maximum driveway widths. We do encourage shared driveways to try to limit, so you're just not driveway. There's separation requirements between them and maximum widths there to try to minimize that where you have a bunch of driveways coming out at once. With regards to the setbacks, we're still keeping the same overall setbacks we have, except for reducing the front yard from 25 to 20 for the primary house, just to encourage.
And the side, right? You're reducing
Side
the
is staying the
sides?
same at 8 feet.
Oh, I thought it was going to be set back to 5.
No, the side setback. The side setback is still staying at 8 feet.
Okay.
The front setback is being reduced by 5 feet. That might have been.
Front, oh,
So,
because I went, 8 to 5 feet on the sides.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
my note.
yeah, no, 20, just from 25 feet down to 20 feet only for the house portion in the front. 8-foot sides are still required, 30-foot rears. We still have some exceptions for the smaller detached, like ADUs, that in detached garages that are staying the same as they have been.
Okay, and looking how we get the cars off the streets with all of this going on in this little plot of land. Okay.
I just wanted to elaborate a little bit on the driveway issue, because
Okay.
this, given University Place doesn't have very many alleys, to get access to these units, you're going to have driveways. We worked on the model code that Department of Commerce came out and worked with a lot of the 16 different planning directors were on this committee that we'd work with to come up with the model code, and it was a big issue, and this graphic came out of that. And your standards are actually slightly more strict. We kind of went with their standards, but they say no more than 60% of the lot frontage can be driveways, whereas our standards is 50%. And also we say, your individual driveways no more than 20 feet wide, so you can't have like a triplex or you can't have a duplex that has two-car garages and just one continuous driveway. What we tried to do is, structure the standards that might allow for you see the two graphics there. One lot has a triplex with townhomes and basically has individual car-wide driveways, and so you're able to get each unit in a triplex still gets their own single car-wide driveway, but they are not able to get three two-car-wide driveways. So you have to make a little compromise. On the right, you can get a duplex with two 16-foot wide driveways and still meet the standard, for instance. So we tried to kind of balance flexibility with preventing the worst case scenario, while with these other standards, like having the minimum transparency standards, ensuring that it's not just garages that you're seeing in the front. You're going to see some windows, and 15% is nothing to shake a stick at. You need to work a little bit to have windows on your facade. And then articulation standards help just to make sure it's just not one flat facade. They have to do something. So that's what we tried to balance. And then entry design is just a basic, provide a little bit of weather protection over your entry. So just real basic integral feature that adds to the quality of living to the residents. So that's where
aesthetically pleasing is important too.
Yeah.
And I also like that it's going to be compatible within the neighborhood, with the design, and like if it's a triplex or a duplex, that it looks like a home. If you're in a R1 with middle housing, that's incorporated into it. I like that feel about that. So that's all my questions and comments right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next on the list will be Councilmember Worthington, but before we get there, just so you know, Councilmember Fleming, I cannot see you on my screen at all. So after Councilmember Worthington speaks, I'll give you an opportunity next, if that works for you. Okay, Councilmember Worthington.
Great, thank you. Question I had was about the front-facing garage doors. So when I think about the difference, you have an example, for example, you have one of the examples or design alternatives talks about alley loading. How does that work with a front-facing garage door, or does that not apply for, it's exempt, I just didn't hear that. And then also, front-facing garage doors may be a challenge, more problematic about kind of constraining some otherwise interesting design alternatives about how how the vehicles may be located on site. Did I hear that right? And what little more details, please, about that? When I say front-facing, I think you use the term street-facing.
Yeah, I've used those interchangeably because the view is from the street, and so that was definitely a primary consideration. Versus if somebody were to propose middle housing behind an existing single-family home, those might be an example of something that could be exempt, I think, in the codes that are being proposed to some of those standards. But those ones directly facing the street, I think of down Morrison over here, there's quite a few fourplexes down there. If you drive down there, and there's a lot of them have those big garage door dominant. They're just facing, and then you have the entry doors much further behind. So in some of the graphics that are displayed, I'm sorry, they're a little bit small. There's just visual effects, but those would be input in the code to separate those garage, so you didn't have a big garage entryway.
So it's more about the monolithic effect of the garage doors in line with one another, or but I'm still left with trying to figure, is it required then to have street facing on the garage doors? And then how do you deal with cottage housing in that particular setting? So I should use the term, courtyard housing is the term I should be using.
I can respond to that. On the garage doors, you don't get credit for the garage door in that 15% windows and doors standard. It specifically says garages are excluded from the calculations. And that's because you want the whole point.
Yeah, not a problem. No, it's just having. Did I hear that correctly? That the standard would be street-facing garage doors. That's really the heart of my question.
Yes.
Okay. And how do you do that with courtyards? So if you have
the garage face the side.
You have 3 buildings around a semicircle, if you will. Where do the garages get located? Does that they need to be surrounded by a street on all sides? I mean,
sorry. Let me clarify. So there is no requirement that you must have a street-facing garage.
Okay.
It is saying if you have a street-facing garage, then it needs to be set back 25 feet.
Okay.
So there's no requirement to have street-facing garages.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think that really clarifies where I was at. I was trying to. There's so many design alternatives that you want to provide for that limits you in such a significant way for a possible need. So okay, no, I'm good. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I've got several questions and comments, but I'm going to dovetail on what Councilmember Worthington was just saying. In one of our council priorities, we have noted that in all that we adopt going forward, the health and welfare of the community should also be taken into consideration. And I think when we start condensing and compacting, we start to risk the welfare and the well-being, if you will, the health and well-being of the community. So that gives me cause to pause when I hear, well, we can still reduce, we can still squeeze, we can still compact. I think our city staff and our planning commissions has done a great job up until now in helping the city get to where it needed to be, adopting all these new rules and regulations and mandates that the state has imposed on us. But the thing that I'm concerned about is that we are sacrificing more and more of what we consider have always held in this community to be the beauty and the well-being of the city, and we're sacrificing that to meet these new types of accommodations. When we talk about setbacks, one concern I have is, it doesn't sound like a lot to go, let's just go from 25 to 20, no big deal. But when you think about what's the impact of that, it's significant, because now you're stacking cars in driveways because you can't get to that can't get 2 cars in there, or even 1.5 cars, which typically most people have, 1 to 2 cars that they live by. You're putting kids, instead of in the yards to play, you're putting them in the streets to play. And you're creating that claustrophobic type of community. And if that's what we want as a city, then I'd say, okay. But, when I drive down the street over there off of Alameda, and I don't know whether it's in the city of UP or in the town of Faircrest, because our property, our city line zigzag through there, there's a community where the minute you drive in there, you just feel the tension increase because of that density that they have placed in that community with these shorter setbacks and shorter frontages for those homes. And how do you get emergency services into those communities when you have people trying to park on the street, people trying to turn around, people trying to visit friends, but they can't? So those are things that I worry about. The other piece of that is when we look at all the infrastructure, all the building that we have allowed in University Place to date, and there's been significant, and I think we will all agree that there's been significant building with the number of multifamily properties, and we have another one still coming in off of Orchard. We've done almost zero infrastructures to accommodate the increase of the traffic that those communities bring. I know several council members, including myself, have asked in the past about where's our city plan to address the infrastructure to accommodate this increasing compacted growth, and we've been promised it's coming, but I don't recall ever seeing it happen. So if we're going to be adding even more density to our communities, and we're going to start taking away from that peacefulness that we have in University Place, I'd love to see what is the city's plan for building infrastructure to accommodate that, i.e., where are we expanding our road systems or improving our systems in which we can accommodate a greater flow of traffic through the city. And then lastly, when it comes to the cottage-style courtyard and the courtyard-type structures, I would not want to take that off the table because I think that is a particular type of architecture that's appealing to our community. I would say, how do we work within that to maybe have that happen, but where we don't feel that increased density, but you can perhaps fit in what you need to fit in without having, again, to take away from the community overall. So those are my comments and concerns that I have. I just don't feel comfortable with adopting a plan that says this runs against everything that we have been saying up to this point is important to us, just to meet some kind of development need. I'm just not there yet. So I'm certainly open to learn more and listen more. So thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Councilmember. All right, my turn, I guess. Got a few questions for you. First, I concur with a lot of the comments that have been brought up. I would also agree that I don't want to see cottage housing fall off the table, whether we deal with it here or we deal with it separately. I do think we need to deal with it soon. I think that is an option that we just don't want to pull off, ignore it here and then just let the other one kind of fade away, because I think there's some real potential there. Couple quick questions on the various state legislation. Department of Commerce, their interpretation on 2 units per lot, does that apply to this 1110 discussion, or is that a separate discussion? And have they come out with a final interpretation?
That does apply to this discussion, and we've got a slide coming up that will talk a little bit about that. They have not changed their interpretation.
Got it. Okay, so we'll deal with that when the slide gets here. Second, are you tracking the status of the Senate bill that proposed eliminating parking requirements? Did that one go through?
Yes. I don't believe it's gone through. However, it had a lot of support, and the way it's currently written, it doesn't apply to middle housing and our ability to require parking on middle housing, which we have a slide on how we're going to require parking for middle housing. It applies to larger apartments and commercial development. They did not, at least as of the last draft I saw, they did not remove it from the sections that applied to middle housing types and ADUs.
Okay, well, that's good news at least. All right. As far as the 20-foot setback, now my understanding is that the garages are still set back 25 feet. That is correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that hasn't changed. All you're doing is allowing them to push the living portion facade forward up to 20 feet. All right. So that makes sense to me as far as the visual appearance of it. I would be interested to hear a bit more about what Councilmember Fleming brought up about, just the livability of the space for, people playing in the yard or whatever the heck that kind of thing is. But the aesthetics of it, I like the idea of it. So that makes sense. Just a comment there. And finally, could you help me out? I know we have the 8-foot side setbacks. How does that apply when you now start talking about townhomes? Which, if you look at the visual you give us, they're side by side by side by side. How do you apply that, or how does that work? Or does it apply even?
The 8-foot applies to the property line going to the neighboring property, not in between the actual units if you have a townhome unit.
Okay, so is that property line then defined by the specific plat? So if a developer bought 3 adjoining properties, could he build townhomes all the way across with just 8 foot on either end of that combined properties, or does the developer have to put 8 feet between every plat line?
They would have to put 8 feet between every plat line unless they did a boundary line adjustment, or they could move a property line somehow, but you would have to still have the 8-foot setback from the side property lines where they are. And you're still limited to the number of units that are allowed per lot. So you could not stack a 10-unit townhome on a lot. You're still limited to the 2 units per lot, or up to 4 if one's affordable.
Okay, so when we're talking townhome-style housing, we're based on our standard lot size. What are we looking at for number of townhomes on a single lot? What would you? I mean, we're talking
2 or 4.
2 or 4. That's it. Okay.
And so just think of that in general, 2 or 4. That's what you're allowed. It could be townhomes, could be an ADU, it could be a house in a duplex. That'd be 3. 1 would have to be potentially affordable if it's on a substandard lot. So 2 and 4 is kind of the number, and it can be configured in a variety of ways, but 2 and 4 is the number.
Okay. So that concludes my questions. Anyone else?
Good.
Councilmember Worthington.
Yeah. How does the front yard setback apply to the ADU with the adjacent, with the primary structure that's in place? Do they have a 20-yard separation from that, or not 20-yard, 20-foot separation from that? Right. So what is the setback requirement for the ADU in relationship to the primary structure?
An accessory dwelling unit, it would have the same front yard setback of 20 feet. And if it had a garage attached with that ADU, that garage would have to be at 25 feet. The setback for a detached, to be considered detached ADU, you have to have a 5-foot separation between the primary structure and the detached structure. And that would be a side yard separation, since they still need a 20-foot front yard separation. Correct, yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. And is that primarily fire code, or is there another reason for that? It's fire code. It's really been the 5-foot separation between a primary structure and an accessory structure has been in place since the city incorporated. It's been the same 5 feet in the zoning code for 30 years. Okay. All right, but still the 20-foot front yard setback for the ADU, depending upon how the structure is oriented, and the ADU has a rear yard setback as well. Yes, the ADU, it could have a reduced rear yard setback, as you remember from a couple of years ago, or a year and a half, when the council passed ADU legislation. That was based on some state requirements as well, to allow up to 2 ADUs on lots that meet the minimum lot size. We do have an exception for a reduced side and rear yard setback for accessory dwelling units of a certain square footage.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Once you go over a square foot, then it has to meet the same as the primary structure.
Yeah,
Similar to what we've had essentially in place for detached garages and other detached structures.
I want to say it was like 800 feet. It was a fairly...
It was 600 square feet for garages. However, since we have to allow a 1,000 square foot ADU based on the state legislation, we do allow a 1,000 square foot ADU detached with the reduced setback.
Good. Thank you for the recap.
All right. Before we move on to the next slides, Councilmember Fleming, did you have any further questions on this so far?
I do not. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you for all those questions. That was it was really good, and we will touch on a few of those other details because we do have more slides. This was design standards. One slide on parking, and then we'll go into some of the other units on lots. Parking is fairly straightforward, as we've already touched on. Well, maybe not fairly straightforward, but it is seen that way. The bill kind of puts a cap on the maximum number of parking that we can require for a middle housing unit. And that is based on the square footage of the lot size itself. And so the commission did look at this and looked at parking options, but is planning but is proposing that we require the maximum amount of parking that we are allowed to regulate under House Bill 1110. And that is if the lot size is 6,000 square feet or less, then we would only require one parking space for the middle housing unit. If the lot size is greater than 6,000 square feet, then we would require 2 parking spots per middle housing unit, and that's as straightforward as it gets with that one. Yes.
Any questions on the parking? The Planning Commission recommended just to go with the maximum we can require under the state law.
I do have one question here, and I'll keep this brief, and this is actually, it's almost as much comment as question. One of the other things, of course, that the housing standards are in conflict with at the state level is also the environmental regulations like tree canopy and things like that. And the more parking you put in place, the less options and ability there are to put in things like tree canopy. Has there been any discussion, guidance, thoughts from state level on how we manage that locally, or is there anything at all, or at the Planning Commission level as well?
I can attempt to. At the state level, we knew this was just very complicated. In fact, maybe Marcus, I don't know if you dealt with the tree code, but for a while with the user guide, we debated on how to deal with this, but ultimately, cities have some of their choices. It's like, we interviewed today, for instance, with the city of Shoreline to help them. They've already adopted their middle housing code, so they're coming in after and doing their tree regulations. And so it'll be interesting to see how that comes out, because there's a lot of tension, obviously, between the two. So we didn't really have any. There's no state law or limits there, so it was really tough to have some concrete language on that. I don't know, Marcus, if you have any other thoughts or words of wisdom on that.
There's nothing from the state that I know of in terms of direct guidance. I think you've hinted on it. It's just a matter of trade-offs when you're kind of having this conversation locally about housing units, how much parking you're requiring, and how much space that parking can take up on the lot, and how much space you want to dedicate for open space, vegetation, trees, of the matter, right? And so right now it's kind of a local matter in terms of kind of thinking about where the priorities are and understanding that the state has required some level of housing units and housing change, and then the other elements of that is up to individual jurisdictions right now.
Okay. Thank you on that, I guess. Go ahead.
My only follow-up would just be we do have existing tree regulations that would apply across the board. So if you remove more than 5 trees, you have to get a permit and you have to maintain a certain percentage of the tree on the lot, and that applies to anybody developing on their lot, either a single-family home or one of the middle housing types.
Okay, so I guess my thought on this would be is that one of the things that makes a community livable is having tree and tree canopy, and at the same time also having places to park your cars, also helping make a community livable. And while I understand the point of how we want to do kind of like go with the maximum requirement, two lots per person, I'd be interested in, and I wish I had great wisdom to offer you, I don't, but creative solutions for, ensuring we maintain some level of tree canopy, or at least the option to have trees without just completely, removing parking. So there's only so much ground to go around. I know that, unless we mandate like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon in every house or something. But I mean, it just, I'd be open to see if there's any creative solutions we can do that to kind of draw, so we know as a city where we should draw our line. All right. And that's my comment. All right. Go ahead.
Thank you. And I will take the next slide here. And this is relating to the development of 2 units on a substandard lot. This goes back to, I believe, Mayor Pro Tem, your question about the Commerce guidance and their interpretation of the state law. So this applies what we mean by substandard lot. That is a lot that does not meet our minimum lot size. So a lot that is less than, I'll use R1 since that's the primary, or we have the most of the city is in R1 zoning. Minimum lot size there is 9,000 square feet. So if you're developing on a lot that is smaller than 9,000 square feet, you still have to allow 2 units on that lot outright. And there's 2 options here. We have path 1 and path 2, and Planning Commission is recommending that a property owner can do either, but not both. So path 1 here is a single-family residence and an accessory dwelling unit, and there's your 2 units. We have many of these existing in the city as we've allowed ADUs over the last 30 years, and some of those have been built on substandard lots. Option or path 2 is to allow a duplex on a substandard lot, but if you were to do a duplex, which would be 2 units in one structure, then you would not be allowed to then add an ADU. That would be your 2 units. And that is what Commerce's interpretation of House Bill 1110 is, that at a minimum you have to allow a duplex on a lot. So this is kind of threading the needle in meeting Commerce's guidance, I think, or their interpretation, but then also not making a bunch of accessory dwelling units that we already have non-conforming, and still limiting the total number of units allowed outright on a substandard lot of 2. And just for an example, just on a substandard lot, some of the other restrictions we have beyond just our normal setbacks that we've talked about, we do have a floor area ratio. Floor area ratio is basically means the maximum square footage you can put on a lot that doesn't meet our minimum lot size. So I give you an example. On a 6,000 square foot lot, the floor area ratio would allow you to build 2,520 square feet of a structure. That could be a single family home. That includes attached garage as well. That could be a single family home if somebody wanted to do that, or it could be, if they did the duplex option, then you'd have, roughly, 1,200 square feet aside. Or somebody could do a single family home in an accessory dwelling unit to meet their 2 units. But you're still limited on your total square footage you can put on that lot of structure because it is a substandard lot. So this is what what Planning Commission is recommending, and that's the way we are, I guess, not running afoul of the Commerce's interpretation and guidance by allowing the duplex, but then also allowing not only a little bit of flexibility, but not creating a lot of non-conforming accessory dwelling units that are already in existence in the city, and allowing somebody on a substandard lot the flexibility to build an ADU along with their single-family home.
Okay. We have a question from Councilmember Worthington and then Councilmember McCluskey afterwards.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for the information. I wanted to add two things I wanted to bring up. You had mentioned that we have many ADUs on substandard lots, and I thought we had asked a while back, a year or two ago, about that. Just how many? Could you qualify that a little bit? I'm not asking for an exact count, but is it a dozen, 20 dozen, somewhere in between?
We averaged between 3 and 5 permits a year on accessory dwelling units. We had an uptick last year because of the new regulations where we had 7 permits.
Yeah.
So 3 to 5 over the last 30 years. Not all those are going to be on substandards. Right. So I would probably guess in the neighborhood of around 30 or so on substandard lots.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted was a magnitude, and you've done that. Thank you. Then the other question I had is in Path 2, that assumes it's in single ownership, so that's a duplex owned by one entity, or is there some way that somehow becomes a townhouse or divided into and I know we're going to talk about that in a moment, but it's a substandard lot. Are we going to allow, or must we allow, division of a substandard lot so you're increasing the degree of substandard compliance or lack of compliance?
Right. I'll let Marcus answer that question.
So we are going to touch on the unit lot subdivision as kind of a tool that provides another option for to do home ownership between those two units. Mm-hmm. So even considering now in a situation you could do a duplex on a substandard lot and either rent the second unit mm-hmm. with one owner living there. They could own the building and do rentals for both units, or you could do a very small condominium setup and essentially do ownership for both units in the duplex as well. Currently, you don't see that a lot because it's very complicated to do condominium, and doing condominium for 2 units just doesn't always make a lot of sense. So you've got a common wall agreement, or you got some sort of zero lot line, depending upon how it's constructed, but okay. Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a zero lot line or a necessarily split. It can just, but it is a common wall building, as you mentioned, right? So there is separation between 2 individual units. Okay, but I still look at that and go, the process rewards noncompliance, and that's kind of a philosophical issue. So if it was a standard lot, I have no problem. If it's a substandard lot, it doesn't meet our, it's below our minimum lot size, it's got some other anomaly. That's sort of, why do I increase the degree? That's contrary to planning principles, so in my view, but anyhow. And is that a choice we have, or is that more of a one more thing the state knows best about? It's a requirement from the state, and I guess another way to think about it, even now, even on a substandard lot, as was mentioned, you could do an ADU, and I assume that ADU can be an attached ADU, right? And so it's not, we often think of duplexes as units that have very equal sizes, but you can have, even currently in your code, a house and an attached ADU, and have living situations with shared walls, essentially, that are similar to a duplex, if not a duplex in name. Yeah. I understand what you're saying. I don't necessarily agree with the state's position. So, okay.
Good. Councilmember McCluskey.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I concur with Councilmember Worthington because we had that discussion about pathway to home ownership before, and that thought had crossed the back of my mind that it could be a condominium-style HOA that could be formed for 2 owners on a non-conforming standard lot, rather. So I see a pathway forward where the non-conforming will eventually become conforming, and we'll have to maybe adjust our code in accordance to that?
There's no requirement from the state for us to change our minimum lot sizes for the city to do that. You can still keep the minimum lot sizes. It just, the state is requiring the 2 units on all lots.
Yeah, I understand that, but will we, since we consider that non-conforming, but now we're conforming, so the non-conforming will now become conforming. Why would we create a non-conforming situation?
That's a question that I need to think about for a second.
Okay.
But it still is non-conforming, the lot is. It still would be.
Correct.
The structure can still be conforming on a non-conforming lot.
Because of our definition, it's non-conforming, but if we change the definition, then it could be conforming.
I think a clarifying point is the non-conformance is related to just the lot size necessarily. So it's basically when you hear the term non-conforming, it's basically the lot is smaller than what the current minimum lot size is in the code, and so the lot, quote unquote, is a non-conforming lot. The structure itself on it doesn't necessarily have to be a structure that is non-conforming. I think is a.
It will conform to our codes, the structure, but as Councilmember Worthington indicated, because it's on that substandard lot, it will be a non-conforming use, even though the structure and the design standards will be conforming.
It would be a conforming use. It'd be an allowed use. The only non-conformity would be the actual lot size.
Okay. Well, I'll let that go for right now. Path 1. So the floor area ratio in essentially that little ADU that you have here with the little gold circle can go up to 2,500 square feet. Is that correct? Okay, so okay. So can you clarify that for me?
Yeah, the accessory dwelling units are still regulated by the maximum size for accessory dwelling units in the code that was adopted a year and a half ago, which is 1,000 square feet.
Okay, 1,000 square feet. Didn't they increase that from 1,000?
No, we were at 6. The city was at 600 previously, what they allowed, and then the state required us to up it to 1,000, so we did have to increase it to 1,000.
And then another clarifying, the 1,000 square feet would include the garage.
An attached garage? The 1,000 square feet for an ADU. No, that 1,000 square feet for an ADU does not include garage space. It includes living space.
Just living spaces.
The floor area ratio, though, for maximum structure does include attached garages in that square footage. So that example I gave of the 2,500 square feet does include attached garage space.
Okay, and that can go, all that can go up to 2,500 square feet.
Total
the
structure.
Garage and the home and the ADU.
You have a maximum of 2,500 square feet you can build on a 6,000 square foot lot. Example.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Wait. Well, Councilmember Worthington, you had a follow up?
No.
Okay, never mind. Councilmember Fleming, since I can't see you, do you have any comments at this point?
I don't. It all sounds clear as mud from what I gather listening to everyone, but no, I don't have any comments at this time.
All right, thank you. Okay, gentlemen, please go ahead.
All right, thank you again for those great questions. We're going to move on to another section that is going to be one that is a little unrelated to, well, it's related to middle housing, but it was something that became a discussion in the Planning Commission, with Planning Commission, and that is possibly going a little bit further and allowing a little bit more than what the minimum the state is requiring. Again, we're at 2 units as the base density. Anything more than that requires an affordability component. The planning staff has quite frequently received many calls from property owners with duplexes, existing duplexes. Now, currently we do still allow duplexes. Under our current zoning code, it has its own minimum lot size of 13,500 square feet. And this is going to change with the middle housing down to the same as a single family home, but that ends up having a lot of duplexes on a larger piece of land with some room for an accessory dwelling unit, especially a detached one. With that, the Planning Commission, in their study, is recommending that we allow, when there is a 2-unit, and I'll say 2-unit because it might not be a duplex, townhome, stack flat, there's a couple of options, but a 2-unit one, and that's our base density, that they could add an ADU without triggering the affordability requirement, and that would just be one ADU that is within the constraints of an ADU, the ADU parameters. Again, it wouldn't be a full unit to make it into a triplex or anything like that. The standards for an ADU are set at a maximum 1,000 square feet, and some of the other standards that we've discussed too here. And particularly if it ends up being a detached ADU, there are some other requirements there as well. And this, again, planning staff frequently does get a few calls from duplex owners with available room on their property to add a duplex. And so the Planning Commission does recommend that the City Council consider that one accessory dwelling unit would not trigger affordability requirement as well. There's nothing else to add.
This is on the question is, this is on our this is on conforming lots. We have about 300 duplexes in the city, 600 total units. They're currently allowed on a 13,500 square foot lot. So the question for the Planning Commission and their recommendation, the question for council is, the Planning Commission recommends allowing one ADU to a duplex lot that meets the minimum lot size outright without having to do the affordability requirement.
Okay, Councilmember Worthington and Grassi.
What's our minimum ADU size in terms of square footage?
ADU or?
Yeah, ADU. So if in that example, if a duplex comes in, they want to add one more unit, what's the smallest unit they can build that meets our code requirement as a square footage?
It would be it sounds like a building code question. I'll probably have to get back to you. I mean, you have to have, there's some minimum standards to.
Yeah, what I'm kind of hearing is that could be a tiny home as we've come to understand them.
It could be. You could. Most of the ADUs we've seen are probably, the smallest is probably around 400 square feet. I think we've seen 4 to 5, and then we've seen a couple at the 1,000 that we allow up to.
Okay. Just want to make sure I have my parade of possibilities. So.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Grassi.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. My question was kind of the opposite as far as our maximum ADU size allowed there, but also the requirement between the duplex unit and the ADU as far as spacing requirement. Is there a requirement there that we have on that? How many feet is that?
If it's detached, 5 feet?
5 feet.
5 feet separation if it's a detached, to be considered detached.
And we have about 300 conforming lots right now that this would apply to.
Yes. I would caveat that with, I can't guarantee they're all conforming lots. I believe almost all of them would be, but we have 300 duplexes currently in the city.
And currently with our ADU allotment, this is allowed currently now with a duplex, or it is not?
No, currently we do not allow an accessory dwelling unit on a duplex lot. And we've received, as Kenneth mentioned, we have received a number of requests over the years about adding an accessory dwelling unit to a duplex lot, but we currently don't allow it.
Okay. And do you have any, I'm sorry, back and forth. Do you have any history as far as, or with other developers as far as when they let unit renters know, property owners, that they're adding on an ADU? I know we haven't allowed it yet in our city, but in other jurisdictions, is there a requirement to then, do they have to give a time allotment, let their renters know when this would be coming onto their property? when they would add it?
There's not any existing standard that we have, I believe, in our legislation for that situation. It'd be a similar example to just getting a building permit and adding on, or adding a garage. There's no notice to the existing renter or person living there that we have on the books.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember McCluskey.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Okay, here's another clarifying question. So when I'm looking at the drawing that you have an ADU that could be maximum out at 1,000 square feet, right? If it's a garage, could it be 2,500 square feet?
Not in
Okay,
this
not in this situation?
Yeah,
Okay,
because
just in the other situation?
yeah,
Okay.
had to meet the setbacks.
Okay, because I could foresee in the other situation where somebody could go in with a 1,000 square foot ADU, add it on, get a garage, and then the garage is converted to a living space. Is there anything in our code that prohibits that, or?
Yes.
They can, okay, thank you. That's important. Now, let's go back to this situation with the ADU with a 2-unit middle housing. That ADU that's in back of here, where would you foresee so if they put in a garage, so where would you foresee a driveway or going to that back unit on that particular lot, the way that lot is laid out right now? And the ADU renter has a car or two.
Yeah. In this situation, that's a great question. So this would probably, in this situation, there would have to be an alley access here for them to provide parking. So we still have the minimum parking requirements for an ADU, and they have to show that on the lot. This is kind of illustration purposes only, and it would be tough to
Thank you for even clarifying that. It's not realistic according to our codes. All right. All right. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Beating the dead horse a little bit longer, Kevin, what is the value to the city to allow ADUs on the duplex lots where we currently don't allow it?
The Planning Commission debated it and discussed it quite a bit. And they thought if the goal of this legislation was to provide housing choices, housing options, more affordable housing types for aging generations or young couples, or even a small young family, they thought allowing this outright would provide more housing choices and more affordable options for the city. And it also could, as we're going to get into in the next unit lot subdivision, it can also allow more ownership opportunities by being potentially able to subdivide this into a unit lot subdivision and sell off the units.
Mm-hmm. So using that thought process that you have, I have not heard in any of our conversation tonight anything that talks about or allows for housing to be affordable. I could put in, let's say, 4 or 5 ADUs on my property, then subdivide it and then sell it for value, whatever I think that value is. But it may not be affordable to anyone that we had in mind that could afford to buy property like that. So where in any of the conversation we've had tonight does it mandate that those new dwelling units have to be, quote, affordable, end quote, whatever that magical number may be, so that a family could afford to live there? I mean, we're making provisions to allow for additional housing, but there is no provision in there that caps the cost of that house or controls what the selling price of that property may be. So, we could probably pat ourselves on the back for a job well done, but if we haven't made the house truly affordable, then all we've done is just created more legislation to increase density. So where does a planning commission or where does your team see the city being able to control those prices and make it truly affordable?
we've got the next 2 slides to discuss that affordability requirement. However, just in general on your question, the affordability, this is kind of the question on when do you want the affordability to kick in on a duplex lot that meets the minimum lot size. So we have the state law requires that if you do up to the 4 units on any lot, you have to designate the one affordable, and then we can get into the, we'll talk a little bit about what the definition is for affordable and approximately what those rents would be and how they're established. However, then there's the question of just allowing the 2 units outright, and then in this particular case, allowing the additional ADU outright on this just to provide more supply of a smaller housing unit, which they're going to, just by the sheer size and nature of them at 1,000 square feet, they're either going to rent or sell for much cheaper than a 2,500 square foot house.
Now, I will tell you, the rental market is kind of crazy at the moment, and where I have properties that are smaller than some of the bigger homes that we have that are renting for much higher than what a 4-bedroom house may rent for. I mean, those prices are literally all over the map. And unless we, want to put our toes in the water to start seeing about how do you manage the actual cost of rent or the actual sale price of a home. I could build ADUs all day long and say, okay, I'm building 4 ADUs. Each of those are worth about, keep the conversation easy, $100,000, but I'm going to make one ADU $75,000. But if that $75,000 ADU can't be afforded by anyone, then I haven't really accomplished anything. Other than I've made a designation, but I'm still doing well. It's one thing to talk about affordable housing, it's something to actually do something about it. And what I'm still looking for us to come up with is how do we actually ensure to the public or ensure to ourselves that we are providing what, by our definitions in your next few slides, are truly affordable. I mean, if I sell you a house for $250,000, that may be affordable to you, may not be affordable to someone else, but can I call it affordable housing? Probably. So I guess what I'm looking for is that missing link between what is truly affordable and what's not.
Okay.
Does that track at all?
Sure, and I can add, this is just, it's been an issue that's been brought up by a lot of council members in different cities and planners. So yes, there's nothing that requires in this scenario on your screen for those to technically meet the affordability requirements. But as Kevin noted, these provisions here seek to provide some opportunity to create some more units and smaller units, more units on a lot. So at the end of the day, this creates, let's just say, 50 or 100 extra units beyond what would be allowed in your current code. Those would be 50 or 100 extra units that don't exist today, irregardless of what the price is, but that just allows more quantity. Maybe that affects the price, maybe it doesn't. But given that there are additional units on a lot, odds are they're probably going to be cheaper than the single family house alone. So for instance, the city of Kirkland, this was brought up, and the planning director acknowledged, these aren't going to be cheap, especially with the construction costs right now. So instead of there being $3.5 million single family home, it's going to be $2 million duplexes. But at the end of the day, if that creates a couple more units that are cheaper than that 3.5 million, it's kind of a trickle down proposition. If you don't do anything, you're not you know, if you don't do anything, there's maybe 50 units that don't exist in your city. So I think that's part of the thought process here.
And just to be clear, Bob's example there, that's in the Kirkland context, okay? Do not expect 3.5, 2 million homes here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But does the city ever have the right in all this legislation to put a cap? If I came in as a developer and said, I want to build 10 ADUs, and you said, great, love to have them, but in your 10 ADUs, you've got to build 4 of those that cannot exceed $100,000, so that house now is truly affordable. Can the city ever have legislation that says this is how we're going to make sure that house is affordable when it goes on the market?
So let me jump in here real quick, Councilmember. The next 2 slides get into the issue of affordability and the legal definitions. I think if we let them go through that and then see if your question's been answered by the end of that, and then if that, we'll do that. And then also I'd like to ask the staff and everybody to also consider the word, because affordable does have legal definitions associated with it, and I don't want us to confuse that with something more that's like attainable, which is probably market rate housing, but it's just smaller. So that, you know, if you can't afford the $2,500 square foot home, but you can afford the 1,200 square foot home, that's attainable, but it's still market rate, not affordable. Just want to make sure we clarify those as we go forward. If you're okay with that, Councilmember Fleming, we'll just go ahead to the next 2 slides. If not, if you want to keep going with your question, you're welcome to.
No, I'll hold back and see where we go with this, and then reserve to come back and have a conversation.
Outstanding. Thanks.
All right, so as you mentioned, we do have the two slides. We'll probably park briefly on this one and then move on to the next one, because this one here is just to remind the council, I feel like we've talked about this enough now, that up to, with House Bill 1110, up to 4 units will be possible if one of those is an affordable unit. And it's also important to note, again, these images are not to scale, and for illustration purposes only. We showing, you know, a townhome style 4-plex going one way and a 4-plex in a courtyard, but there are still going to be restraints. And I think it is important to note throughout all of this, the presentation, that the legislation requires this to be permitted, but it still really does depend on the lot and those typical constraints of that lot. So while one person may be able to achieve something of this nature, their neighbor might not be able to. Lot sizes vary and a difference. So there are still going to be constraints like setbacks, parking, and we do have our design, again, going back to those design requirements that are being proposed previously. So all of those will be a factor when somebody does say, hey, I have this lot, hurry up, I get up to 4 units on it, and then we start to look at it and maybe start to chip away at some of those and say, well, maybe you can't really get 4 units, but here's something that might be more feasible. So that's where I'll stop with this slide. We'll go on to the next one and really get into some of the definitions of what those affordability requirements are. Again, they are coming straight from House Bill 1110, because it does specifically point out these affordability requirements, and there's a lot of percentages being thrown around here, but in order to, again, from that base density requirement of 2 units, in order to achieve anything more than that, 3 triplex up to 4-plex, they would have to identify one of those units as an affordable unit, and that unit does have to be designed, built, constructed in a similar size and scale to the rest of the units. So you can't have, one unit that's wildly disproportionate to the market rate homes. That would be prohibited based on this bill. The cost of that unit, there are 2 elements of it. One is rentership and one is ownership. So the cost of the unit, including utilities, excluding telephone, can't exceed 30% of the monthly income of that homeowner, of that household, whose income doesn't exceed 60% of area and median income if it's being rented, or 80% if it is being subdivided condo and is up for ownership. Now, again, area median income, that's established, the HUD numbers, those are also updated annually, and so the numbers would be updated annually along with those. And again, the other requirement is that a property owner must record a 50-year covenant. That's right out of House Bill 1110. That is recorded on that unit on the property and identifying that as a affordable unit for at least 50 years. And beyond that, it would then could convert to a market rate one. But for the time being, 50 years, it would be an income restricted affordable housing unit.
Could you tell us, do you have an idea of what the current AMI is?
Yeah. Oh, yes. We did look it up. For 2025, current AMI is $120,800.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
That's sort of the meat of the affordable housing concept. So I think now would be the time that we could start looking at some of those questions that we have, but that's right. What would be required under, and they would record. We'd have a contract, and that the city would review. It wouldn't just be up to the developer and recording whatever they want. We'd be involved in that and make sure that that a document is recorded if they chose to go this route to get that additional units.
Okay, I'll start with Councilmember Fleming.
Trying to find my mute button. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I still didn't hear what I was asking about, and other than you have to file that you've built 4 houses and one of those is deemed affordable, it still doesn't answer the question of what's made that house affordable. If I build 4 houses, they're $400,000 each, and I make one designate one as affordable housing, that house may be only worth $150,000, so there's room for it to grow over that 50 years. But it doesn't really make it affordable. It's competitive in the market space, but it's not truly affordable. And I think, Kevin, you made a comment earlier that affordability is also defined by the cities. In other words, $2 million in UP for a home may be considered unaffordable, where $2 million up in Redmond or Bellevue may be, budget dust for buying a home up there. So my question again to y'all is, can the city come up with a means by which we can truly ensure that the homes that we are allowing to be built that are supposed to be affordable for citizens, that they are truly affordable? Because right now, if I develop my own property, for example, I'm coming out still smelling like a rose, because there's nothing that tells me that I have to build X number of homes, but within a certain price range to make it affordable to the people in the community. Does that make sense, that question?
I can try to answer and give you kind of an example of what the affordability, at least out of the state for a rental unit. Let's take that. So the area median income, the HUD number is Pierce County. So that's the HUD. When you go to the Housing and Urban Development, they break it down by region. So that 120 is the local number for this year, which was a little surprising to me. It was actually that high. And then when you break that down on a rental, so somebody making only 60% of that can only pay 30% in rent plus utilities. What that comes out to is $1,800, and that includes utilities and rent. And the utility number is, we've seen examples for the utility number used based on household size, and Tacoma Housing Authority has some good numbers. For this household size, it'd probably be roughly $200 is what they allot for utilities, not including phone. So that means you would be renting something for about $1,600. There's ways to kind of break it down a little bit further depending on up or down, because this is kind of an example for a one-bedroom place. So a two-bedroom place could be a little higher. A one-bedroom or a studio could be a little bit lower based on that. And then for the home ownership, it is at the 80%. So you could only somebody making 80% of 120,000 can only spend 30% of their income on, let's say, the monthly mortgage for it, and that establishes the price. So that's how it's kind of defined in the state on a way to try to break it into what's considered affordable, which is somebody paying 30% of their income towards either rent or ownership, and that includes utilities.
So I could take that number that you have, instead of making it a 30-year mortgage, I could make it a 60-year mortgage and make that home very affordable. And by definition, we would be there.
Possibly, you have to sign a 50-year covenant deed restriction against it. So if you were to sell it, that would still apply to any future sales down the line.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, I don't want to take up the council's time on it. I think there's a gaping hole in this legislation that that permits us not to get to where we want to be. Now, I'm just trying to figure out how do you close that loophole. It's a big one.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, if I can add, I think one of the key factors here is when the legislature adopted this and the state was looking at the issue, was trying to come up with some figures that helped make it affordable, but also were doable from the construction and development side. If the affordability provisions are so strict that they're just not constructible, market feasible to add, no one's going to do them. So I think that's part of the, some economists did some work on looking into the issue, and so I think that's the risk. If you decide to try to go farther than the state's requirements, you might risk not getting any takers on this, because it might just be, construction costs are too high to be able to make it work and pencil. Just something to think about. Unfortunate fact of this. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to do my own, council member math, which is always risky. So I just used $120,000 as the AMI. I know it's like 121 or something, but keep the math easy. So $1,800 a month for rental plus utilities is the cap. I mean, plus utilities being included in that $1,800. Correct. Yes. And then for home ownership I came up with $2,400 a month for cost of the mortgage plus utilities. Does that include taxes? Property taxes? Because that's part of everybody's mortgage payment. I'm just curious.
For the sale price, you're talking for the for sale product.
Yeah.
Then no, it's. I'd have to look at that, because it basically, when you're doing the first sale, you're not necessarily looking at the what they're paying per month. You're looking at what it's going to sell for. So it creates a home price of $400,000 or $300,000. So you would, I believe, in that situation, you are including.
Okay, and then let's go back to that then, and this is kind of going back to what Councilmember Fleming was talking about. When you're doing a calculation, are you basing it on a 30-year mortgage, or because they're talking about AMI like it's a monthly expense, which is what we're looking at with a mortgage, but what is their operating assumption for the length of term of that mortgage, or is there one?
I don't believe there is one, because it's just based. It creates a sale price, and then whoever the purchaser is would have to get whatever mortgage worked for that.
But how do they create the sale price if there isn't an assumption about how long the term of the sale will be for? That's my question. Okay. So anyway, just obviously some follow-up. We don't need to beat that horse any longer.
That one I think I needed I will say this, on the affordability stuff, since we don't have any existing programs in place for these, we were searching around trying to find ones out there on Created, but we spent a little time on the rental price, but I'll get back on how they calculate the sale price for you.
Much appreciated. Thank you. I have no further questions on this. Does anyone else? All right, let's go ahead. Thank you.
The last several slides, I think we have 2 or 3 left. 3 left on unit lot subdivision. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Makers, and I believe
All right.
Marcus.
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, so unit lot subdivision, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, this is another tool, housing policy tool that was required from a separate RCW, as you see on the slide there. And we included it in the update related to the middle housing update as well because of the benefits that it could do in particular for middle housing and ADUs. So unit lot subdivisions are a way to divide property for separate ownership, and they're especially helpful for middle housing. And as you can see in this kind of diagram here, the way that we've defined the terms in the unit lot subdivision is there is a parent lot, and the parent lot is basically kind of the existing lot as you kind of understand it today. And then the unit lot subdivision is a lot created from the parent lot, approved through the unit lot subdivision process, and in a kind of tongue-twisty way of saying is basically creating a standard recognized lot through the parent lot as a new type of subdivision, as an opportunity to be able to sell that off potentially to other property owner. So here we just have some diagrams of different ways you might see unit lot subdivision. This is not necessarily different ways of how you might see unit lot subdivisions in University Place in relation to the middle housing, but diagrams nonetheless that are showcasing how an example on the left where you have a single family home and maybe 2 ADUs in the backyard, and you separate your property into 3 unit lots where maybe most of the unit lot or the single family home still has the largest lot between all of the unit lots, and you now have split up the ADUs or the duplex units in the backyard as opportunity lots with their own designation, mailing service, all that different type of stuff that can be sold to separate owners. You'll also see in the kind of middle example and the far right example, examples of how spaces on the parent lot that are not part of a unit lot subdivision are kind of be owned in ownership, so that can be a common open space or a shared driveway that people all use to get to their units to park their cars, rather than separating those individual pieces into the unit lot. That can be an option where there is kind of shared maintenance between all of the units, and is a helpful tool. I think that covers unit lot, this slide. And the Planning Commission's recommendations on the unit lot subdivision additions and the concepts that we proposed there were to essentially add a new unit lot subdivision chapter to Title 21, and that the unit lot subdivision process will follow the short subdivision process. So you currently have a short subdivision process in your code. It just follows the same process in terms of maps and kind of how it flows through departments and gets recognition. So it would follow that same framework. It's, instead of saying short subdivision, it would say unit lot subdivision and kind of meet the standards that are recognized in the unit lot subdivision new chapter. Let's see, development on the parent lot shall comply with design and development standards. So as we've talked about, your unit lot is not a tool to get out of design standards. It's not a tool to get out of the development standards that we talked about earlier in the meeting. You do need to comply with all of those. It is essentially just a tool to create a new lot for ownership options and separation of units. As mentioned, you'll see there will be language in there that designates the title of the plat shall state it is part of the unit lot subdivision, so it'll make it very clear during the process that this is a unit lot subdivision. And we also made sure to have some language in there that makes it very clear that unit lot subdivisions can be used to subdivide an ADU from a principal unit, and also that unit lot subdivisions cannot be further subdivided or further, like a unit lot cannot use a unit lot subdivision to further divide. And it cannot be used to create or increase any nonconformity that may already exist on the lot.
When it's my turn.
All right, are you ready for questions?
I believe so. I think this is the last slide of the unit lot subdivision, so yes.
Okay, Councilman Worthington.
Thank you. Just as a reminder for me and perhaps others, difference for us in University Place between short plat and long plat. What is the break point? How many units?
9 lots would be anything 9 or less is a short plat.
9 or less is a short plat. And then this can subdivide just a single lot. And somehow this is different than some lot line adjustment. It's you can take a lot that doesn't have a line and move it. You actually create a new line in this process. Okay, a few questions. So Marcus, a few moments ago, you said that you cannot use a unit lot subdivision to make a lot more non-conforming. Is that what I thought I heard you say? Okay, and earlier, an hour ago or 30 minutes ago, it doesn't matter how long really, we talked about that illustration in the packet of a duplex being subdivided by a unit lot, which was a non-conforming duplex discussion. And so that would have made a non-conforming lot further, if it didn't fix the non-conforming, it would make 2 non-conforming lots instead of 1 non-conforming lot.
You can jump in after.
Okay, you can go first.
So it doesn't change, it doesn't make the lot any more non-conforming.
We got 2 of them now, you only had 1.
No, there's just
But there's still just 1. So your parent lot has not changed, and that is the distinction of non-conformity. What you've done is you've created
lots for ownership.
yeah, I think that's probably the easiest way to.
I didn't quite hear, we just created
Lots for ownership.
lots for ownership. So is there a difference here? What is a lot for ownership versus title?
It just allows for ownership, just like a condo. So think of it as a condo. There's still one, it's the parent lot that counts for zoning purposes. So for zoning purposes, there's still just one non-conforming lot. That hasn't changed.
In the example, so we've non-conforming duplex, gets split, got to think of that as a condo. Somehow it's not a title or fee ownership. It is a can minimize, whatever the right term is, ownership is conceptually what to think about. Okay. Now, okay.
The unit lot doesn't have to meet the minimum lot size if that's where you're going. Either the parent lot meets the minimum lot size, or it might be non-conforming, and then you create a unit lot out of that for one of the units on the lot, and then that unit lot doesn't have to meet the minimum lot size.
What is difference between? So, I mean, I'm just my head is spinning over a variety of things. So, the parent lot. There on the south side of the lot is Unit A. On the north side of the lot is Unit B. Parent lot was we have a unit lot subdivision or unit subdivision done. Somebody needs an easement for a power utility. Who grants the easement?
As part of the review of the unit lot subdivision, we would review for easements.
No, it's a new easement. It's somebody who comes in, they want to have gas. They don't have gas. I got to give you an easement to get gas line on my property. Unit B wants it. Unit A doesn't care. Unit A is the primary or the parent lot. How do they get an easement for the gas line? Who has that authority?
That's a good question. As actually spoke to the commercial real estate program at UW last week, and we had a developer with us and also another economist. And usually in those cases, there's in the plat they could set up maybe one of the lot owners is sort of the manager of those types of activities, or at least it sets up some of the rules because there are some strange things that might happen, because you might have three. Let's say you just have two.
Yeah.
You got 2 unit lots on the parent lot. When you come in, your zoning, for instance, you need to meet your lot coverage, for instance, and so you might have, one of the unit lots might try to do an expansion or do a bunch of things, and suddenly that might trip the lot coverage standards. So there's things that they might do individually that might affect the other lots. So that's where, when the owners do these unit lot subdivisions, they might want to set some parameters and who's in charge of these decisions. So it's kind of going to be the Wild West in some way, and both the developers and staff are going to be
fair amount of uncertainty.
I would say they would be similar. I would compare it possibly to situations on let's call a large plat of 20 homes or more, and you have common areas that are owned and controlled by a homeowners association on what can be done there. So with a unilot subdivision, I'd say you'd have kind of some similar provisions that would control how some of those things would occur. That would get recorded with the unilot subdivision.
It would be good if they put it together. Okay, so that's just one of the issues. The other thing is when they're short plat subdivisions, we're using the same process. There's a 5-year prohibition from, you do a short plat, you can't do it again for 5 years. So in unit lot, is that the same way?
We have there's similar language in the unit lot subdivision.
Okay, but I don't know. I mean, in our simple example of a duplex, there wasn't anything left to divide, at least not until the legislature has another session. But in this particular case, there could be a case where there was something further to be divided, and so in 5 years from now, they might be able to do another unit lot. Is that how that would work?
As long as they still meet as long as they still meet the units per lot that are allowed for that zone. So in University Place example, you do 2 units, that's your base units per lot. You do unit lot subdivisions for each of those. Maybe 5 years down the road, you decide that you want to do 2 more units. The only way you're going to get 2 more units is if one of them is affordable. Yeah. You do one of the affordable units, and you decide that you're going to expand the unit lot subdivision to incorporate those other units as well, so that they can also be sold off as individual units potentially.
Okay. Yeah. So I want to be able to think about the cascading effect over time. Yeah. Okay. And then another thing that I get concerned about is SEPA. So SEPA is triggered by units and square footage, and are SEPA triggered, do you recall?
Short plats do not.
Short plat is covered by SEPA or exempt from SEPA?
Exempt.
Exempt. So it's at 10 units, and a long plat, you get SEPA. Okay. Makes sense? Got it. All right. And we're not likely to trip that in unit subdivision or unit. It is unit lot subdivision. Okay.
No.
All right. I guess SEPA is key for us to get any type of mitigation and a variety of fees, at least so far. And I'm going to guess these are exempt from any type of impact fees. So has this legislature exempted them?
No. The impact fees still apply. There was, with the accessory dwelling unit regulations, that they did put some stipulations in there on we can't charge, I believe it's 50% maximum of what a single family home is charged. So our 2 impact fees that we have, the traffic and the parks, would apply to any of these accessory dwelling units, any of the middle housing types.
Okay.
calculated at a lower percentage than a single-family home, though.
So when we want to know how mitigation occurs for how do we fix traffic, we get some proportionate fee in our traffic impact fees in this process.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's enough for now. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember McCluskey.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Interesting perspective, Councilmember Worthington.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. So here's my little mind working again. When you create this new chapter, the ULS new chapter for Title 21, it almost seems like you're making some of these adjustments that we're doing that could possibly be non-conforming into a conforming use here for home ownership. You're not going to tread on that one, are you?
Well, I still would say you'd go back to if you've got a non-conforming parent lot, it still stays non-conforming, even if they do a unit lot to split it to sell off half of a duplex. You still have a non-conforming parent lot. So there's no proposed changes to any of that.
Even with this new chapter that we're creating? Okay. All right, here's so on the one you have the townhouse units, that diagram there. So the townhouse, to me, townhouses mean 2, and then you have 4 here. Why do you describe this as a townhouse when it's a quadplex? Not, it's 4, right? And
correct,
to Councilmember Worthington's point, creating that 4 frontal blockage, and then I believe you indicated that wouldn't happen with our design standards, but we have this created here in this diagram. I'm sorry, I'm going back to the diagram. I'm kind of literal in my perspective, so, because when I'm going to vote on this and I see this diagram and I don't question on it, can we actually have, so I assume these 4 townhouses are actually, they're not townhouses. They're going to be 4 separate houses that are attached with walls. And that creates a 1 type frontage. There's no separation between the 2 townhouses because they're not a townhouse. They're all puzzled in together. Do you understand what I'm kind of
a little bit
saying?
Yeah. And you're talking about the diagram on the right, the town.
Right, because when you answered Councilmember Worthington's, there was 2 townhouses going to have, setbacks around it, and it's not going to be that uniformed, frontage. But now we have here this diagram where there's 4 units together that will create that uniformed frontage.
This example here, the example here, you see the streets called out at the bottom of that, and so the access to this is on the back.
The back side.
If in this example, if you were doing 4 units, one of them would have to meet the affordability requirement for this to happen. And you can see the setbacks is measured to the outside property line, the original lot line.
Correct.
On the outside. That's where your side yard setback is measured. And then you run the unit lot down the common wall to create the unit lot to be able to sell off. We have similar examples to this that have occurred in the city for years, really. Not the 4 units. It's been 2 units where we have duplex. We have the boulders right behind us here. Those are duplex units. They ran a 0 lot line through the center of those units, and then their setbacks are measured to the outside. This is a similar example to that, but it's a 4-unit building that would have to meet the affordability requirement based on the state law.
Okay, so why are these called townhouses?
I believe our definition of townhouse is more than 2 units attached.
More than 2 units attached?
Yeah, is a
Marcus,
townhouse.
you want to,
Okay.
you got it there.
Although there is, I still personally, I struggle sometimes with these definitions because
Right.
a stacked flat to me is still a duplex. It's 2 units in a building.
They're overlapping.
Or a fourplex to me is
Right.
could be a townhouse
That
if
could
it
be
looks like
this.
this because it's just a
Okay.
4-unit building. So there is kind of some overlap with the way those are.
Okay.
Go for it.
I think
You got the definition though.
Yeah, your definitions in the packet, how we have it defined here is just townhouse means a dwelling unit attached to one or more such units by one or more common vertical walls in which each unit occupies the building from the bottom of the foundation to the roof, and no unit is located over another.
Okay. So separate individual units, and they could be like,
So you can have a duplex townhouse. You can have
Right.
a triplex
you
townhouse.
can have like 6 of them.
Yeah.
No,
No.
four.
Yeah.
We have the, right. 4 in our city, but I'm just, because you never know what could change. All right. So now I have another understanding what townhouses are, so thank you, appreciate it. All right, I'm done, thank you.
Okay. So we've got about 5 minutes left in our meeting. I do have one more question. Councilmember Fleming, did you have any further questions before we continue? If we need to, we can move to extend our meeting.
I do not have any other questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll get my question in here real quick, then you can go to your last slide. Basically, when it comes to the ULS, kind of the way I'm absorbing and interpreting this is that you have kind of like existing law that surrounds a plat. And we're now basically creating a new type of land unit ownership that hasn't really existed previously. And it's going to have its own rules, regulations, and everything that govern it. And so, yes, I strongly agree with adding a new ULS chapter to our Title 21 because I think we should do a lot of thought up front and public comment and everything else on how we manage these up front so that it's not, we try and take some of the Wild West out of this. So I would really, I know we've got to do something here by June 30th, but I don't want us to stop there. I want us to really look at what a ULS is and what it should be, because unless the state has given us, anything more to work with other than you got to do it, I really think we need to start putting in some guidelines for how we do a ULS in the city too, so we can address things like easements and, and expansions and further subdivisions 5 years down the road and all that stuff. I really think we should do some advanced thinking and look at that. So that's my one comment here. And hearing none others, if you want to go to your last slide and bring us home, we can do that.
Sure thing. Thank you. So what happens next? Just to let you know that we're in the state 60-day review period. We've submitted it to Commerce for the 60-day review, which ends on May 20th, so the council cannot take any action until after May 20th. We have a deadline of June 30th, otherwise the state law automatically preempts our zoning. And so we have up till June 30th for council to take an action. Otherwise, the state law preempts our current legislation. So with that, we've gone over the state requirements of House Bill 1110, the two units per lot and up to 4 if one's affordable. We went over the Planning Commission recommendation and kind of the next steps. With that, would conclude my report and take any more questions from you. And also, one question you might have is, do you have to have a public hearing on this? Planning Commission did hold a public hearing, so there is no requirement for the council to hold a public hearing, but if you would like to give us direction on that, we can hold a public hearing as well prior to taking action.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm hearing yes. Hold a public hearing.
Okay.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. All right, and was there any, I don't recall, even though it's part of the agenda meeting, did we have another study session on this prior to the public hearing or between now and June 30th? Do you recall that? Or is this, or have we covered all we need to cover?
We've covered the whole packet. If it's up to the council discretion, I think currently we have it on the first meeting in June. I don't know the date. I believe we have it on the first meeting in June on the agenda, and it could be the public hearing at that date if the council is ready for that.
Okay. Am I seeing any further need for study before we go to public hearing? So I got one yes?
Well,
Or can you do the study during the public hearing?
yes.
Okay, we can do that. So right now we'll go with public hearing to go forward. Okay, thank you. And with that, we've concluded all our agenda items. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
All right. Yeah, good job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Yeah. Yes. Councilmember Clement.